Yes.
But rabbis are not big.
Rabbis what? Say.
Rabbis are allowed to decree.
They can decree, but they can't change the halachas. They can add fences to halachas. So they can basically make further prohibitions in order to make it that we don't stumble on the ones we have. But here, in this case, if you'll notice, he's permitting something that was prohibited. He said, you can eat this shchita, even though it doesn't. There's no opinions that say you can. So that's taking into a different direction. We're not allowed to do. Anyway, so going back to the point, why is him the Mashiach? First of all, let's just remind ourselves: all chidushim are really things that were already found in the Torah, but they're called new because the sage basically found them with his own intellect. They were never seen before, but once he found them, it was revealed basically that he found something that was already hidden in the Torah. The difference between the chidushim of nowadays versus Mashiach is that the ones from nowadays or from up until nowadays, they are probed by the mind of man, and therefore they only go so far into the mysteries of the Torah as far as man's intellect can reach. And therefore, in the place of Mashiach's chidushim, which is basically achieved through prophecy, which is where even God's mind can reach, even all the chidushim we have today are called hevel. They're called like vanity and vain in place of the chidushim of Mashiach. However, we do learn from them that just like our chidushim are already found in the Torah, so too Mashiach's chidushim are found in the Torah. Just what? They're found so deeply that only God could know them. And therefore Mashiach has to be a prophet. However, why does him revealing all these secrets not go against the rule that it's still called Torah Chadasha? It's not prophecy Chadasha. Because he's also wiser than Shlomo. And we said that he's going to be able to find these deep mysteries that only God would know, but he's able to then explain them to us in a way that the rational mind can understand. And it's like he's teaching you Torah that as though, you can understand it with your mind. The only difference is he's finding secrets that would never been able to be found by the human mind. But having found them through prophecy, he then explains them to the human mind. That's why Rambam gives him these two criteria of being on one hand a prophet, on the other hand he's wiser than Shlomo, because he needs actually to have those two qualities in order to lefichach yelamed es kol ha'am, in order to teach all the people the new Torah.
Is that true though? Because if he's smart enough to explain it, wouldn't he be smart enough to find it?
He would be smart enough to find whatever Shlomo found, or so a little bit more than what Shlomo found. But the point is, it's all from man.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if something is so high,
no, it's from man. That's the point, because he's wiser than Shlomo. He's been gifted.
Would he be able to find it without prophecy?
No, he'd be able to find that which the human mind could find, even like, let's say, the peak of the human mind. But that's obviously no comparison whatsoever to what God could find in the Torah.
He's still starting out smart to explain the stuff.
Because God granted him to be the wisest man that ever lived, so that he could actually basically explain godly things to the human mind, which would only be found by God, but then could be explained. This is how it's understood. And regarding the second question, how can Mashiach come along and change the laws of the Torah? For example, he's going to permit this shchita. We'll use the same answer, because he's not, God forbid, changing anything. He's going to come and reveal to us the fact that the laws of shchita actually already contained this unique case. And it was already part of the laws of shchita that you could shecht the shor habar with a fin, even though in all the laws of shechita we've ever seen up until now, we never knew that law. He's going to come prophetically and tell you something that only God could know, which no man has ever seen before, that particular shechita is kosher. But what is he going to have to do then? Explain it to you like King Solomon, how that's going to actually suddenly make sense. And this is what the Rabbi basically sets forth to do, which is awesome. Okay, that's what we got up to. Any questions? Good. Page 180. Second paragraph down. First, we will look into the Mefarshim. Sheheter shchita zu hu ba'ofen dehorasha. So the Rebbe says, before I'm going to go and make this crazy new chiddush, which essentially he's trying to say, let's just put it out there. It is what it is, right? He's basically saying that he's essentially prophesizing, or he's describing the Mashiach as going to prophesize that this law was already part of the laws of Torah, and no one ever knew it until now. So what did people think until now? He's not the first person that addressed this issue that there's going to be this heter in the time of Mashiach. How did the Mefarshim up until now explain it? Why does he feel that was not sufficient? So this is what he says for us to do. There's Mefarshim. He brings here footnote 31. all the different Mefarshim on the matter. And he says that this heter, where did it come from? It was part of what's called a Horat Shah. What's Horat Shah? What is a Horat Shah?
Teaching of time.
It means a temporary injunction of a tzaddik, of a prophet, that can come in and tell you that basically something that's outside of the bounds of Torah, because he's a prophet and he's allowed to come in and for a one-time injunction, he's allowed to basically change the rules of the Torah. This is the law. Right? He says, so that's how it's been explained till now. How's he going to come in and say you can eat this thing? Because it's going to be like a prophet has the ability to temporarily come in and tamper with the laws of Torah for certain inyanim, as long as he doesn't make us go serve idols. That's like the one thing he's not allowed to temporarily tell us to do. But anything else, if he's a prophet of God, he can come in and basically give us unique instructions that seemingly break the Torah, and you're allowed to do that. So Mefarshim previously have said this is what this is. In other words, you don't have to look so far. It's not such a big deal. We know about this.
It's all Torah.
Yeah, but the Rebbe says that's the problem, that it's al pi Torah, because inyan zeh einu mager Torah chadasha. That you don't need a new Torah to come forth, because it says how is this going to be kosher? And the Midrash says Torah chadasha meiti tetzeh, a unique Torah of Mashiach is going to come forth and teach us this. Well, guess what? If this is a Horat Shah, we don't need a new Torah of Mashiach. It's already part of the old Torah. We know about such a thing. So the Rebbe outright rejects all these Mefarshim as this was explained up until now, because that's not called Torah chadasha. Right, he's quoting here, and he says, this is from the Rambam. He says, we learn from the original Chachamim and from tradition, B'chol, im yom lecha hanavi avor al divrei Torah, if a prophet, and again, there's criteria of prophets, and he has to be a bona fide prophet that's been checked and seen to be righteous and telling the true prophecies. If he comes and whatever he tells you, shamalo, you have to listen to him. Chutz mi avodah zarah, except for idol worship. V'hu sheyeh hadavar the future. As long as he tells you, it's only a temporary, right? So this is not called Torah chadasha. What's the proof? The Rambam said it. It's sitting in the Torah we have now. Therefore, the Rebbe says this is not like a regular temporary injunction, but rather this is a whole new thing called a Chiddush in Torah, that comes directly from God Almighty, that you've never seen such an answer like this before. And what is his proposition? He doesn't want to say that a prophet Mashiach is going to come along and make something which is prohibited temporarily permissible. He wants to come along and say Mashiach is going to come along and say you can eat this because it's going to reveal to you that all the laws of shechita you never knew. There was one special law that you're allowed to eat from this shechita. It's mutter. It's not something he has to undo a previous iser. It's in the laws of shechita that only God knew of until now, that it is actually permissible. V'yesh lo'osiv, and we want to add in these brackets. Shematzinu dugmasu gam b'horat shah. This is a very deep and interesting little sugya we're going to get into right here. That we find when it comes to the concept of the horat shah, this temporary injunction of the prophet. Right? We know about the Rogatchover. We speak about him a lot. This is one of the great sages in the era of the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe actually very much held by him, and he quotes him frequently, and he actually took smicha by him. So the Rogatchover comes and says, Nogea lahorat shah de Eliyahu bahar haKarmel. Right? One of the famous examples, which the Rogatchover basically is going to like kind of obliterate, but one of the famous examples, if you say, Rabbi, what's a horat shah? You're going to say that it's like, for example, Rabbi Eliyahu Navi came in the days of the Baal, right? It's part of the Tanakh, and he said that you can offer a sacrifice outside of the Beis HaMikdash this one time, because at those days, right, there was Jews that were, half of them they had 1 foot in and 1 foot out when it came to Hashem. They were sort of held by Hashem on 1 foot, and they also were holding by these idols of the Baal on the other foot. So all the prophets of the Baal, they basically, Eliyahu said, let's put it to a test. You make an altar, and I'll make an altar for God, and whoever God visits from heaven with a fire and like collects their sacrifice, that will be the true God. So he made it. He told them to make an idol worshiping altar, and he made an altar for God. And this was outside of the Beis Hamikdash. The truth is, once the Beis Hamikdash was built, you're not allowed to build any altars for God outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So the fact that he did this was usher, and we usually use this as an example of a horat shah. Here, because he was a prophet, everyone held by Eliyahu Navi, he was allowed to temporarily undo the laws of the Torah for this one-time thing of making this outside. It's called shchutei chutz, shechting the animal for God outside of the altar and offering it. So this is usually what's considered a horat shah. And he says that, where do we learn this from? Where do we learn this that he was allowed to make such an offering? It says, right, in Parshas Re'eh, the pasuk, Hisham lecha pen taleh olosecha b'chol makam asher tireh. The official prohibition of offering outside of the temple comes from this pasuk. It says, lest you offer in any old place that you see. In other words, guard yourself and don't do it. Aval, right? And so on this, the Rashi over there brings, and it's a drasha from the Gemara, Aval atam mali v'kol makom shiur lecha navi kederech sha'ala Eliyahu b'har Carmel. And Rashi right away brings over there, yes, you have to be careful not to bring an offering any place you see, but you can bring in a place that the prophet will tell you, like when Eliyahu Navi will tell you to bring an offering on Har Carmel. Right? So right in the Rashi there on the pasuk which tells you not to bring and do shchutei chutz, right? Shchitas chutz. There's a Rashi that says, but if you're going to say to yourself, wait a second, didn't Eliyahu Navi do that? So Rashi sort of preempts that, and he says, unless a prophet tells you to do it, like Eliyahu Navi on Har Carmel, right? So seemingly, Rashi is just enlightening our eyes to the concept of horat shah that Eliyahu took the liberty to do. And he just happens to bring it in conjunction with this pasuk as like an example. But the Rogatchover has kind of a field day with this. And he says, L'chora, ma'at sorach b'limud meyuchad, nosav al klalus halimud horat shah, mimasha kasuv elav tishma'un. The Rogatchover says, why does Rashi have to bring that here? If you just give me, right, another parsha in Shoftim, right, which is right in conjunction with Parshas Re'eh, if you have parsha before, I learned over there from a unique statement which says Elav Tishma'un, which means you have to listen to him, which is referring to listening to a prophet who tells you to do things that are not kosher. In other words, the ruling of horat shah. We just learned that from another pasuk. What's the need, asked the Rogatchover, for Rashi to come and bring on the pasuk regarding shchitas chutz, yes, that suddenly but it doesn't apply with if Eliyahu Navi will tell you. Why do I need a special limud for that on the pasuk about shchitas chutz when in a parsha beforehand you just told me the whole concept that there's such a thing called the horat shah from the pasuk Elav Tishma'un? You following this? We just learned the previous parsha. Elav Tishma'un, even if he tells you to transgress one of the mitzvahs of the Torah, do anything that he says, as long as it's temporary. We just learned that. Right? Rashi, we know, does not mince words. So what, he has to remind us? We learned the parsha before, suddenly a case came up. There's other cases, right? He could have brought it from different places when this kind of thing jutted out. He says, "Sha'chidush b'zeh she'ein alav shem shchutei chutz klal v'havei karben." And this is the Rogatchover's amazing chiddush over here. He says, because when it comes to Eliyahu Navi's offering on Har Carmel, the fact that we learn that out from the very verse about the prohibition of offering shchitas chutz comes to teach us that there was actually a leniency, not even a leniency, there was part of the laws of shchitas chutz to begin with, was such that you're never allowed to bring an offering outside of the temple unless you're Eliyahu Navi on Har Carmel. And that's why we don't learn this from Elav Tishma'un, that it's a teaching that you have to listen to a prophet, whatever he tells you, because this is actually part of the laws of offering outside of the temple, that to begin with, it doesn't apply in the case of Eliyahu Navi and Har Carmel. And that's why in the very verse where we learn you're not allowed to offer outside the temple, it comes together with another teaching, which is unless you're Eliyahu on Har Carmel. In other words, Rogatchover is revealing to us, Rashi's not just enlightening us that there is a law called Horat Shah that we learned in the previous parsha. That has to do with the previous parsha. It's nothing to do with this verse. This verse is coming to tell you that there's an exemption to the rule of Shchitas Chutz, which is that to begin with, when we were given these laws, it didn't apply to Eliyahu Navi on Har Carmel. And that's why there's a special limud attached to it right there, because it's a wondrous thing that it came together with like a unique one-time heter. What does this remind you of? The Shur Habar, right? In other words, this is Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest man in the world, basically trying to explain to you, according to the rules of Torah, that this wild thing that he's saying has a precedent in the Torah, and he's going to teach it to you. In other words, you're saying, Rabbi, you're going to tell me that from prophecy you learned that there was a law that was in existence that no one ever knew about except for you right now, and you want me to believe that? And so he brings you the Rogatchover. He says, I'll give you an example of such a thing that I already learned from my teacher, the Rogatchover, that there is such a thing of a whole prohibition, right? Which is, you're not allowed to offer any sacrifices outside of the base of Mikdash. And guess what? It came with leheter. You know, it came with one example when you are allowed to. And that was, if you happen to be Eliyahu Navi on Har Carmel, feel free to do it. And how do we know that? Because we're not depending on the teaching of Horat Shah, right? That's why Rashi, the Gemara, they bring right inside of the very pasuk that says you can't do it. He says unless you're Eliyahu, which you can do it, which means it came with its own get out of jail free card. And the Rebbe is saying, so what I'm saying is maybe not so crazy, right?
Why are we not relying on Horat Shah?
Go ahead. I'll get to you in a second. Go ahead.
Really focusing just on the Leviathan?
Yes.
Just focusing on that.
Why? Because this is the one example that we have. The Mashiach is going to change the laws in the future.
So we have one example.
One example.
Therefore, we conclude that there's going to be more.
We are going to get into more, because there's other Chazal which tell us that other laws will change. But when it comes to Torah Chadasha, and like the Midrash tells us, there's this thing which is the new Torah of Mashiach. This is the example that it brings. That basically, how are we going to eat this ox? And it says Torah Chadasha me'ititetze. So we know to look there to understand how Mashiach is going to tamper with halacha in the future. And so what he's saying is basically, he's not tampering with halacha. He's revealing to you deep, deep secrets of halacha that you didn't know were there. In other words, you're allowed to do such a shechita. It's part of the laws of shechita. And if you're going to say you're a lunatic, where did you get such an idea that a whole group of halachas comes with its own get out of jail free card? He said, what do you mean? Shechita's chutz.
Where's the Torah Chadasha? What's the source for that?
The Midrash from Vayikra Rabbah, Koheles Rabbah, what did we say? Vayikra Rabbah.
Yeah.
Chapter 13 or 3.
Wait, why is it?
You can look in the. Okay, so again, let me explain. Ready? So we're saying you could either look at these cases are almost identical. That's why he brings it, right? You could either. How do we look at the case of the Shur Habar heter up until this sicha? That Mashiach was using a tool that prophets have, which is that they can make you go against the Torah on a one-time temporary basis if they want to, based on this pasuk called Elav Tishma'un, listen to him temporarily, right? So the Rebbe kind of blew that up, and he says that can't be what's going on here because that's not called Torah Chadasha. Mm-hmm. But a similar thing comes up in the laws of Shchitas Chutz, which means shechting outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Mm-hmm. That when Eliyahu is going to step up and make that Shchitas Chutz, he's going to shecht outside of the Beis HaMikdash on Har Carmel to prove that there's a God, mm-hmm. right? One could argue that he was relying on the same heter. He was a prophet, and he has a Horat Shah, a temporary injunction based on the pasuk Elav Tishmun. You have to listen to him, and therefore he had every right to break the law of Shchitas Chutz when he offered that sacrifice because he's a prophet. You have to listen to him as long as he doesn't tell you to worship idols, right? However, we have a question that the Rogatchover brings. If he was merely executing his right for Horat Shah, why do we learn on the pasuk about Shchitas Chutz, like that Rashi brings right there, you can't check outside the Beis HaMikdash unless you're Eliyahu on Har Carmel, right? The previous parsha, I don't know exactly. Shoftim Re'eh, I think they're right
In a
next to each
different
other.
spot in the Torah when they're talking about Shita's Chutz, it says
In the Rashi there,
commentary.
and Rashi brings it from the Gemara, right?
He's talking about shechting outside the Beit Hamikdash.
Shechting out the Beis Hamikdash, and yeah, unless you're Eliyahu Hanavi.
on Har Karmel.
Yeah. So in other words, we all thought until the Rogatchover came and opened our eyes that why can Eliyahu Hanavi do this? Because he's a prophet and he can tell you to do Elav Tishmun. You have to listen to him. But the Rogatchover asked a very good question. Why are you bringing me that information right now on the pasuk? You're not allowed to shecht outside the Beis Hamikdash. You just told me a parsha beforehand, a prophet, no matter what the law is, and anytime he wants to, if he tells you to do something against the Torah and it's not a Avodah Zarah, you have to listen to him. I remember. I learned it the last week's parsha, and I remember. Why are you then telling me again, specifically in conjunction with this Shchitas Chutz? It doesn't need to be there. It's a special teaching about the laws of Shchitas Chutz. It's not a teaching about Horat Shah. And what the Rogatchover proposes is that it's actually part of the laws of Shchitas Chutz that you're not allowed to shecht outside the Beis Hamikdash unless you're Eliyahu Hanavi and Har Carmel, then you can. In other words, that's part of the laws. Therefore, Eliyahu was not bringing out his power as a prophet to make a one-time injunction and break the laws of Shchitas Chutz, because the laws of Shchitas Chutz included Eliyahu Hanavi's ability to do this, which is essentially the exact type of Torah Chadash that the Rebbe is proving about his own topic over here, which is that there are certain things, even in the Nigla that we have today, which is basically showing you that there are deep secret heterim inside of certain laws that are part and parcel of those laws themselves, right? And therefore the Rebbe is saying, yes, it seems like I'm bringing this out of prophecy, and therefore why should you believe me? Well, that's what we said before. Mashiach has to be A, a prophet to go find those secrets, but B, smart enough to show you in the Torah how that makes perfect sense, which a second ago we would not have believed him, right? If he didn't show us this amazing teaching from the Rogatchover, you'd have just been like, well, who are you? I'm going to say pigs are kosher. What are you going to tell me about that? Yeah.
People just thought it was a Harasha, or he explained it to them.
They probably waited for the Rogatchover to explain to them what was happening. I mean, they certainly had a right to listen to him because he was a prophet. So they were good to go. The question is, like, if they had a whole bunch of chachamim sitting around, like, inspecting this, which Mastama they did. Maybe that's where the Rogatchover got it from some tradition, but probably not, right? But if they would have inspected it, they would have come to the realization that he wasn't whipping out his Elav Tishma'un card. It was just part of the laws. He was allowed to do that. That one-time thing.
Rashi hadn't commented then, though.
It's not that was not a Torah Chadasha, is what we're saying, because it's in the Torah we have right now. The Rebbe is just using that as an example. Hold on. Torah Chadasha is there's no at the time. Anything until Mashiach comes is not called Torah Chadasha. It's part of the Torah that we have. And it's all called Hevel before the Torah of Mashiach, which is you need a new prophet who's close to Moshe and wiser than Shlomo. There's no Torah Chadasha before, right? It's only now, or only Mashiach. Everyone following? It's not the easiest little topic to wrap your head around. Shimon, you on the game there?
I'm with you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so going on. Chassidus bezeh, right? Top of the left column. What is the Rogatchover really saying? Ein alab shem shchutei chutz klal. That what Eliyahu Hanavi did was not under the prohibition of shechting outside the Beis Hamikdash to begin with. It was a carbon. It was just a regular mutter carbon because he basically inside the laws of shchitas chutz there was like a little caveat named Eliyahu Hanavi, and he had his own little heter to do that. He didn't have to break any laws. Hainu she'ein zeh heter. It was not a suddenly permit, la'avur, to transgress on the Isra of Shchitas Chutz. Ki'im shebezeh, but rather, lo ne'amar l'milchatchila Isra de Shchutei Chutz. It was never part of the prohibitions of Shchutei Chutz, that one-time event. Now we're going to hit some footnotes, but let's first finish this. V'yesh lomar, the Rebbe wants to say, al derech zeh. I'm using this as an example of the chirish, of the heter, of the shchita shurabah b'sna pirav leviyasan. This is a perfect, it's even talking about shchita, right? It's a perfect example about what I'm trying to prove to you. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal a Torah Chadasha, right? A chirish that would never be able to reveal to anyone who's a regular human being. Only through God Almighty Himself. Is this like an insane statement the Rebbe's making? He's the one revealing this. That the laws of Shechita, L'chatchila, we're never addressing, the ones that we've seen up until now, we're never addressing this unique Shechita of the Leviathan and the Shurabar. That's something that God had in store for us, that Mashiach would reveal to us. And here it is on a silver platter. Is that insane? Who is this man? Okay, so
It's not a heter. It's going to be a completely new
it's mutter.
permission.
Yeah, mutter. Okay, so we have a few minutes. Let's look at number 37 in the down below. He says, I'll give you an example. And again, if you don't like that one example, he's going to show you a plethora of examples from the Torah that's not Chadasha, so that this Torah Chadasha can be filtered through human understanding. And he says, this is the chiluk bein heter chilul Shabbos b'kuach nefesh, right? It's basically, you're allowed to, so to speak, mechalul Shabbos to save a life, right? Everyone knows that? Amra Torah, what does the Torah say? It says, desecrate alav Shabbos achas. You should desecrate one Shabbos so that you can keep many more, right? So in other words, if you're gonna save a life, it's worth saving the life to desecrate one Shabbos so many more Shabbos could be kept. Shlefi shah hetirato lechalel Shabbos. There it says, temporarily, you're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos. Lakravesh shnei kavasim b'yom haShabbos, right? Hold on a second. Wait. There's a chiluk. Okay, I'm sorry. There's a difference between that and another issue of Shabbos. So let's say you're going to go pick, you're going to go slaughter a cow because there's a sick person that needs to eat meat or something like that, right? Or you're going to pick something out of the ground. He needs herbs or something to live. So that's called desecrating the Shabbos, which means the Shabbos does not allow for that in the laws of Shabbos, but you're allowed to break the laws of Shabbos in order to do that to save a life. However, there's another thing called offering shnei kavasim b'yom haShabbos. You can offer two tamidim offerings every Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash, right? It's called the tamid shel bin arbaim and tamid shel shachris, right? Two animals, you're allowed to shech them and burn them on fire. Ein zed dechia or heter dechilul Shabbos. This is not called pushing off Shabbos. You're not called breaking Shabbos when you offer those two animals, but rather, this concept was part of the laws of Shabbos to begin with, that offering and making a fire and shechting an animal, if it's these animals and if it's in the Beis HaMikdash, that's part of the laws of Shabbos to begin with. So notice this is something actually quite common, as it turns out. This is something that happened every single week in the Beis HaMikdash, this kind of example of there being like a built-in heter to a clear and obvious prohibition. Yes, sometimes there's a one-time injunction. There's a person who's going to die. I have to break Shabbos. That is called breaking Shabbos, and you're allowed. But sometimes you can quote-unquote break Shabbos, and it's not called breaking Shabbos at all. It's part of the laws of Shabbos that you're not allowed to build a fire, and you're not allowed to shecht an animal unless you're in the Beis HaMikdash offering two sacrifices. Then you certainly are. So it's like a built-in heter. He's saying the same thing applies to you. Chazak u'baruch.
He's going to say it doesn't apply with
No, that's the same thing. It's a built-in. That's his whole point. It's a built-in